What is up, NBA fans? I am Jason Burgos. I am joined by another member of Team Sportsnaut who has also done tours of duty for NBA.com, USA Today, LA Times, and that man I speak of is one of the great talents in the game of NBA reporting and an insider for our site, and that is the one and only Mark Medina. Mark, thanks for joining me today to talk some big storylines in the recent release of the 2023-24 NBA schedule.
Yeah, Jason, thanks so much for having me. It's hard to think that the season is right around the corner just after having a pretty eventful season and off season. But that's just, I guess, the nature of the NBA.
Yep, and I mean, and the schedule is always a fascinating thing. It draws a lot of attention because it's a chance for the NBA just to get a little notice in the dog days, like you mentioned to me off the air. And they I think they really hit on certain days and stuff like that. Christmas, opening night, and we're going to talk all about that. And let's talk with opening night, which opening night for the NBA will go down. What's it? October 20. What's the day for opening night?
I believe it's October 24th.
24th. And on the 24th, you'll have the Denver Nuggets versus Los Angeles Lakers. Then you'll have the Phoenix Suns versus the Golden State Warriors. Just give me your thoughts on the direction the NBA went with these two games. I get it. They're all big teams, all big brands. You got the champions, you got the Lakers, you got the Suns. But, man, heavy Western Conference focus here. Is that the smart play for the NBA? Is that where the real interesting things this year will be? More in the Western Conference?
Well, I think there's a few things here. I mean, traditionally, opening night, opening week, the NBA is always going to unveil marquee matchups, good rivalries, because, it's a ratings draw. But I think specifically this opening night, it was very telling, and it was, I think, a perfect approach in this two specific matchups. With Lakers, Nuggets specifically, they faced off, against each other in the Western Conference Finals. Once the Nuggets won the championship, but even prior to that, there's a lot of trash talk heading the Lakers' way. And so I think to tap into that, to have it be opening night where the Nuggets are going to get their championship rings, I think just kind of adds more juice and fuel to, maybe some additional feelings that the Lakers might have. I think the second part, when you're looking at the Warriors, Phoenix Suns, it's hard to really think or really hard to wrap your head around this reality, but Kevin Durant still has not gotten his full video tribute with the Golden State Warriors since leaving 4 years ago in 2019. And what's happened was there's been this perfect storm of Kevin Durant having different injuries, and then with the pandemic, there being either no fans in the building or limited fans. And so while technically the Warriors have welcomed Kevin Durant when they've matched up against each other both home and away, they didn't have that full presentation at Chase Center with full capacity fans in the building to really express their appreciation for Kevin Durant playing a major part, obviously, in their 2 NBA titles and 3 finals appearances. So it's 4 years overdue, and I think the fact that they did this opening night is, look, you never know with injuries in today's NBA, and especially where Kevin Durant's career is at. So opening night, you're going to be guaranteed, I think, for the most part, that Kevin Durant will be fully healthy to accept that farewell tribute.
I mean, you could have went with Celtics and Heat and stuff like that, but they don't have the sizzle of these teams that they did mention. I think they nailed it in a lot of ways. And also, going back to the point you made on the Suns and Warriors, I mean, Kevin Durant is just team petty, and he's probably still butthurt by those things, and he wants his flowers. So if he gets that adds a little intrigue, the history. There's great history in both of these, but like you mentioned, it's the franchises, the marquee team. Speaking of marquees, because this kid may be one of the faces of the league coming up, and that's Victor Wembanyama. His debut is the next day versus the Dallas Mavericks. Again, talk to me about this. Is this possibly the best matchup for Wemby in his debut, with going against a marquee team that has 2 big stars in Luka and Kyrie? But they were a bit messy last year, didn't even make the playoffs. They got a lot of work on their own. Is this the right thing where it's like a name team but maybe a win? Or is this a tough matchup, especially since the Spurs really did not do a lot to give Wemby a lot of help in this rookie season in terms of adding free agents and veterans?
Yeah, well, look, I think probably that's the relatively easiest matchup then against other so-called playoff contenders. But I think it's really about Victor Wembanyama facing off against every NBA star. And I think that while there is a lot of hype around his rookie season and if he's the real deal, I don't think there's a lot of expectation around the league that the Spurs are supposed to make the playoffs this season. So I don't think it's so much about, okay, can they face a team that they're most likely to win? I think it's more about how does he look with dealing with the physicality and
Yeah.
going up against star players. So, yeah, you can't go wrong with the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic's got the international flavor. Kyrie Irving's a star player. But I think with Victor Wembanyama specifically, there's a reason why the Spurs have 11 national TV games. There's not only intrigue about his rookie season, but any kind of welcome to the NBA moments that he might have against the league's current star players. And that, really goes across the gambit, whether it's the Lakers, the Warriors, the Denver Nuggets with Nikola Jokic. Really take your pick there.
Is there any particular matchups in terms of one-on-ones kind of things? It's a very different time in the NBA. The game has shifted so much to the guards and the swingmen, and the front court guys aren't the focus of the big stars anymore. So there isn't like that plethora of big names in the front court like there were in the 90s and back and stuff like that. And especially he might be playing more power forward, maybe instead of center and stuff like that. Like with Scoot Henderson and Andrew Miller, you can look at excuse me, not Andrew Miller, Brandon Miller. You can look at certain things like, these guys can play this guy, or he's going to go against this guy, because there's so many stars in their positions. Is there any particular matchups that you're looking forward to when Wembanyama meets him? Is it like an Adebayo? Is he really even going to get much action against Jokic and Embiid? Are there any, or even Chet Holmgren? Maybe that's the one everyone's looking at as two big kind of similar base guys and big prospects.
Yeah, I think there's two lanes here. I mean, any matchup where he's going against his rookie class, so circle Portland with Scoot Henderson, Charlotte with Brandon Miller, but those two players play different positions, have different roles. But I think it will just be captivating enough to just see, okay, which rookie has been most equipped with leading their team to a win. I think the second track's a lot more intriguing with going against the NBA elite big guys. So I'm thinking Lakers, Anthony Davis, Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green. He is technically a forward, but he would be guarding Victor Wembanyama. Knowing how Draymond is, he'll try to be pretty physical with him. So I'm looking at that. Philadelphia with Joel Embiid, Denver with Nikola Jokic. And no doubt, I think the feeling about Victor Wembanyama, he has a very unique skill set. He's going to be a generational talent, great rim protector, point guard skills in a big man's body, but the physicality is obviously the thing a lot of people wonder, how well will he adapt. And no one is saying, hey, you got to bulk up and be like Shaq, but people are saying, okay, can you bulk up enough to be resilient to go against other physical big guys? Because it's inevitable. Any rookie that enters the NBA, that's a number one challenge, but especially given his circumstances with hype and his thin frame, that's going to be an even bigger challenge that opponents will try to test him with. So that'll be very intriguing and fun to see who and when wins those chess matches.
And I wrote about it for Sportsnaut a couple of months back. I like the approach they're going with, that when he was in France, they weren't necessarily trying to make him bigger, which is the assumption. You got to bulk up to play against the big guys. They were kind of like, look, he's good as he is. Let's kind of like add the levels and just let him be who he is. And considering guys like Kristaps Porzingis bulked up a little bit and got injuries, I mean, why not try something a little different? But you nailed the physicality. In his first preseason game, he kind of talks about, it wasn't as tough as I thought. It's not as hard as I thought. They play harder in Europe. Really? Of course, Draymond Green has comments, so those kinds of things are going to be fascinating. But speaking of matchups, in your Sportsnaut, Pete, please go over to the site, check it out. Mark looked at like some of the other big storylines, a lot of the major big storylines from the schedule. You mentioned the potential reunion game, because hanging out there, there's still this possibility of James Harden getting traded. This drama going on in Philly. There's still Damian Lillard possibly getting traded. Of those two matchups, if there is a trade that happens between either one, which is still not a guarantee, because both sides are playing hardball in those conversations, which one's the most interesting?
Yeah, well, look, you can't go wrong with either. But if both players are traded, I would choose Damian Lillard. I'd much rather see kind of the mending of fences with the organization and Damian Lillard. That as much as neither party wanted this to end in a divorce, let's use this moment to appreciate what Damian Lillard did for the organization with all those playoff appearances, becoming the franchise's all-time leading scorer. Look, people like the drama and the pettiness. So if James Harden gets
I
traded,
love it. I love the
um,
pettiness.
it's inevitable. He's going to get booed very heavily in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. But I much prefer the Damian moment. I am remiss that I completely left out the Wizards Warriors reunion with Jordan Poole. I think that's going to be
Yeah.
fascinating on so many levels because
Yeah.
on one hand, you have an organization and you have a lot of players like a Steph Curry and Klay Thompson that like to be seen as good teammates, and they're very supportive of him. They're also very mindful that he played a part in their championship. He was a young, emerging
Yep.
talent, but there's also kind of the pettiness element. Obviously, him and Draymond didn't fully patch things up
Yep.
after the infamous punch last year during training camp. I would say, in fairness to them, patched things up enough that they professionally coexisted, but
Yeah.
clearly they weren't the closest of friends. And no doubt you do wonder, especially after he was traded, how much that plays a factor into things, as well as the reality that, to a man, the organization found that Jordan Poole's game was not part of their ecosystem of,
Yeah.
you know, always making the right play and, not wanting a guy that, seems to be producing highlight reels in some
Yeah.
instances and then gaffes in other instances. So with that, because he's on a team, a Wizards team that's, almost going to be like fantasy basketball, like we could see Jordan Poole, go for 50 or even more.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting. But I think no doubt James Harden, Damian Lillard, they're bigger star players. Those will be the two potential reunion games to watch. And if all trades happen, I'm choosing the Damian Lillard reunion game as most interesting.
And I'm glad you mentioned the Jordan Poole Wizards. I was going to ask about that early, and also to add up there. Games on December 22nd, a couple days before Christmas. The family's getting back together. Perfect timing. Well done, NBA. And it really is. It's fascinating, especially if it happens in Warriors, but even if it happens in Washington, because his dad had comments after the trade. Like, just great drama. I am here for all the pettiness. I love it. Going back quickly to the Heat and Damian Lillard, it just seems like when it comes to Harden, because he's such a drama magnet, even though he's not the better player probably at this point, his trade is just getting more attention, more interesting, more fascinating. If Damian Lillard does end up with the Heat as expected, is there just a lacking sizzle in that move? Like, it's like, it happens, okay, we all know it's going to happen, cool, they're better. Like, is that just the nature of Damian Lillard just never being kind of like an attention magnet player, as good as he is? And the fact that the Heat are just never a attention magnet team, and it's just like the most boring, best trade that could happen, like right now in the offseason?
No, I think if Damian Lillard gets traded to Miami, it's it's not gonna be the same level of LeBron James and Chris Bosh going to
Yeah.
Miami, but they become a championship contender again, and it's not the
Yeah.
championship contending team last season that made it in as an eighth seed. It is a team that actually has a sustainable winning formula. So I
Yeah.
think that'll change the dynamic completely from a basketball standpoint. I know that there has been some back and forth this offseason with you know different reporters, including myself, putting out there that people around Damian Lillard have said if he gets traded to a team that's not Miami, that he wouldn't go to training
Mm-hmm.
camp.
Yep.
But I think by and large, people know that Damian Lillard is a good guy at heart. He's a hooper. He's professional. Where James Harden, he's had a peak track record of uh, acting in a very immature fashion when things don't go his way and he wants out. And
Yeah.
what that looks like. He won't come to training camp in shape. He'll come to training camp in a shape, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
He won't give the full effort. He'll be a distraction in practice. And so I think with that, a lot of the attention is on the drama as opposed to the basketball. But yeah, if this trade
Yeah.
happens, especially to Miami, it fundamentally changes
Yeah.
the landscape for the Eastern Conference playoff contention. contenders.
I just wanted to throw out there, just since we're talking Heat, since we're talking Heat and talking the NBA schedule, the Heat play the Celtics East Finals rematch October 27th. Bucks Heat should be really interesting. The Bucks circling that day after what happened in getting ousted in the first round of the playoffs last year. That happens on October 30th. But also, please, if you watch this, wherever you watch this or listen to this, whatever platform, please like, share, subscribe to the channel, the Sportsnaut channel, comment. Let us know what some of your favorite matchups on the schedule that has been released are so far. But I wanted to move over to the NBA in-season tournament. This seems to be the big plan for the NBA to draw a lot of interest, create a lot of speculation and talk. I mean, what are your thoughts on in-season tournament? Is it worth it? Is it a waste of time? Will it maybe start when these games start getting in playing and then matchups are set up and all these things? Will it maybe galvanize interest? Or in your best interest as an expert of the sport that's been covering it for so long, is this kind of like just a weird failed experiment and this thing won't even exist 3 years from now?
Well, look, like with a lot of things in the world, we see how things are successful or not, depending on how it's actually executed. And that's going to depend on the team's health and then just how their attitude is from a organization, coaching staff, player standpoint. But I do applaud the NBA for trying. Though one of the worst things in the world that people can do is not try and not come up with new ideas because you think, oh, this isn't going to work, or this is always the way we've done it, right? So I do give the NBA credit for trying. I also think we have to look at through the lens, like with a lot of things in life, that it's not about perfection, it's about progress, right? So I don't think that it's going to systemically eliminate any issues with the regular season and the apathy and teams, not putting as much importance in the regular season as the league would like. But I do have optimism the more I learn about the structure and how it's going to play out, that it will at least reduce the severity of it. And the reason I say that, it's in a good market with the semifinals and championship games in Vegas, which has been a hub for different NBA events. We know for Summer League, it's been a practice grounds for USA Basketball. The WNBA Aces are there. They've had all-star games there. There might be an expansion team at some point. But I think the other thing is they're having, these group play games feature marquee matchups. Look at the Lakers Phoenix Suns, the Clippers Denver Nuggets. Those games would be games that teams would want to care about, even if it wasn't part of an in-season tournament. And it's also, I think, early enough in the season that it's going to come right after the glow of opening night, opening week, but not too late enough where there's going to be injuries and teams are going to say, you know what, we got to sit this one out. But that being said, I could see a scenario of two things, where young up-and-coming teams put more importance on winning the in-season tournament as opposed to championship contenders because of a few things. For the contenders, I think, as all these guys are competitors, but when they're thinking, okay, what really gets my juices going, it's hard to gear up for that after going through a championship grind. But also I think it gives teams that are either on the up and up in a rebuilding stage, it gives front offices and coaches extra job security because it's an achievement they can point to. But it's also a thing for players that they can feel good about and know what it's like to win and then use that as a launching off point. So I think that's a positive. I think a potential negative is that while those specific games might be viewed with more importance, maybe the non-in-season tournament game shortly before or after, all of a sudden those become heavy load managed. So again, it's not going to completely solve the problems. There is a sense, maybe there is a feeling of whack-a-mole. You hit one and then a new mole emerges. But I think when you look at the big picture of all those different moving parts I outlined, I think it'll be a net positive, and that's how we have to view it through that lens of whether it's successful or not.
And I mean, I'm pessimistic on it. I have my issues with it because it's just the overall issues. But it really is a worthwhile, like you said, it's worthwhile to try. And no one's really going to compete with the NFL until they, step on a nail themselves. But the NBA has clearly shifted right into the number 2 league in the country. Great globally, the ratings have been fantastic, and this could be really one of those things that continues to solidify their place and a continued growth with LeBron on the way out, and not that main face. And the sport is really flourishing and doing well, better than ever. talking about LeBron, you've covered the Lakers for a long time. Want to talk about, is there something interesting in Lakers Grizzlies? I'm always a fan of rivalries. I like rivalries with teams. It brings competitive games, emotion, all those kinds of things you want on television. They play for the first time November 14th. Great series in the first round, highly affected by Ja Morant's injury. Ja Morant's a fantastic player, eliminated the Grizzlies in the first round. Austin Reeves had some interesting comments about liking eliminating them, and they're one of the most trash-talking teams in the league. Is Grizzlies-Lakers a budding rivalry maybe that fans should be looking out for, and that November 14th game is going to be real interesting?
Well, I wouldn't put it in a rivalry in the sense of Lakers Celtics for sure, and I wouldn't even put it compared to Denver Nuggets either. I think it also loses a little bit of the kind of the trash talking luster because Dillon Brooks isn't on the team anymore.
Yeah.
He's with the Houston Rockets, but yeah, I think that it is a notable game that both teams will gear up for. I think for a few reasons. One, they're playoff contending teams. Most of the players on the Grizzlies are returning from last season's team. They added Marcus Smart. He's a competitive guy.
Yeah.
He comes from the Celtics. So yeah, it'll certainly be an interesting game, but I didn't look at that specific game as one that, I really am circling the calendar on, partly because Dillon Brooks isn't on the team anymore.
Fair enough. Now, let's talk about NBA Christmas Day. I think NBA did a fantastic job with the schedule. Great, but 9 teams in the 5 games out of the 10 teams. Let me just list it off real quick. We got Bucks Knicks opening the schedule at noon. Warriors versus Nuggets, great game. After that, Boston Celtics versus Lakers. It doesn't get, like you just mentioned, it's the legendary rivalry on Christmas Day. It doesn't get better TV than that. 76ers versus Heat, another really good series. And then the night comes to an end with Mavericks versus Suns. That should be a wild scoring game. Very interesting, especially if the Mavericks can develop better chemistry by that point in the season than they did last year. You talked about it in your Sportsnaut article. Like, of those games, which ones, since we're kind of talking about looking at games on the schedule, which one or two games on that Christmas schedule are your favorites that you're most excited about?
Yeah, well, look, Lakers Celtics, it's a layup, and maybe that's obvious because it's the NBA's greatest rivalry, and there's so much history among the teams. But I think that it's telling that Lakers Celtics haven't been a Christmas Day matchup since 2008. So it's one of those things that the NBA, unlike maybe in the 80s when, everything's on tape delay and there's only so many games on CBS each week, they didn't want to force feed Lakers Celtics just because it's Lakers Celtics. Yeah. And I think with this year in particular, I think there's a lot of more significance that adds richness to this rivalry for it to be on Christmas Day. Because even though they didn't face off in the finals last year, neither team made the finals. They are two teams that could make the finals this season, so it could be a season or a finals preview, so to speak. You also have the element that both teams are tied for the most NBA finals, 17. I know Celtics fans say, we don't count the championships that the Lakers won in Minneapolis, but look, it's franchise history.
Exactly.
So they are tied at 17. So there has been an undercurrent in recent seasons. Okay, neither team doesn't want to lose that arms race again now that it's tied. And so while obviously that won't settle on Christmas Day, I think that game could provide a good appetizer and a foreshadowing of what June could look like. And when you're looking at Lakers Celtics, it's almost fun to, there's a lot of, it's a Venn diagram. There's a few similarities where, both teams got to the conference finals. They arguably could have gotten to the NBA finals, but, they came up against two good opponents. Both teams decided to further commit to their 2-star players. With Lakers, obviously LeBron James wasn't going anywhere, but they extended Anthony Davis. With the Celtics, they gave Jaylen Brown an extension and very much sent the message that we believe in this duo that Jaylen Brown has with Jason Tatum. But the differences lie on the Lakers really leaned on continuity with retaining the key role players that played a part in them getting to the playoffs in the first place with the trade deadline moves, where the Celtics, they decide, let's make some changes to that third star. Let's trade a really good defender, streaky shooter, great locker room leader for a Kristaps Porzingis, who's a lot more dynamic offensively, but has a lot of question marks about his durability. So which lane is ultimately going to be a better winning formula? Who knows? There's never a right or wrong answer, so to speak, in the NBA. It really depends how it plays out in real time and health. But it will be a fascinating, I think, thought bubble about, which off-season priority was the best philosophy to follow.